Thank you very much, Mr. Chung, for this very kind presentation. We have been working with you for a long time with the National Commission of Korea for UNESCO. And I would say that Korea has been always the greatest champion in the area of education, but not only, I would say, in culture and sciences. So I'm very pleased to be here and to attend this global forum. I have made a presentation, and I would ask to make a global overview very briefly about the education and how the future of learning will affect societies, and what, from the point of view of a leader that I was for 8 years of the United Nations agency that was responsible for education, sciences, culture, and communication, and how we were inscribing this into the global agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we know that in the year 2015, under the leadership of your eminent compatriot, the former Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the United Nations adopted unanimously the 17 development goals. And it gives him an enormous credit to Mr. Ban Ki-moon for the leadership that he has taken, the responsibility, because the 17 development goals are very much part of his legacy. And I have been working very closely with him, with the other colleagues from all of the United Nations system. And if we look around the 17 goals, actually, I would say that UNESCO's mandate is so wide that we have relevance to most of these development goals. But of course, goal number 4 was very much the purview of UNESCO. And I would like here to start with the words of the great Nelson Mandela that said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Maybe I need not say this here in Korea because I know how much Korea changed your society, but we're speaking now about the global developments in a globalized world. So in 2015, we convened here in Incheon to adopt, after years of consultations among governments, about civil society, experts, private sector, academia, to adopt and to formulate goal number 4 of the Agenda 2030, which is about promoting inclusive and equitable quality education, and I emphasize quality education, and lifelong learning for all. Also, the new concept that the United Nations described for the first time. And here in Incheon, we adopted a historic declaration that, once again, I emphasize, it runs very deeply into the values of the Korean society. In this declaration, we have emphasized that education is a human right, but it is also important for social cohesion, for social inclusion. It is equally important for gender equality and women's empowerment, and this is where all the SDGs intersect each other. That quality education is also very important for economic growth and prosperity, something also that was emphasized this morning with the Prime Minister of Sweden and others. And it is also equally vital for protecting the planet and all the challenges now that we have around losing of biodiversity or the climate change. And also it is vital for peace and mutual understanding, for living together as global citizens. Peace and mutual understanding, something that is the responsibility where the Asia-Pacific Institute of Education for Mutual Understanding, APSU, here under the auspices of UNESCO, hosted in Seoul, which Dr. Chung is leading. And what were the new, I would say, breakthroughs in this global debate? First, it was that the 12 years of free education for all, there was a big debate whether we should inscribe this as a goal, because we know that with the Millennium Development Goals and all the thinking, I would say, global thinking before that, what that for the developing countries, primary education is enough. And we wanted to shift this perception, because if we have really to look at the global picture, to look at the long term, to look at the quality of education, to look at all the functions of education, definitely we have to have primary and secondary education and free 12 years of learning. Then we put a strong emphasis on teachers, because we know that there is a need for teachers. There is first and foremost lack of teachers worldwide, and we want, but then teachers should be supported, should be well trained. Then we put a strong focus on technical vocational training, quality education, girls' education, global citizenship, and I will be a little bit more into this. As far as the funding, the financing of education, there was a lot of debates, and we know that still the UNESCO Institute of Statistics has identified a gap of 40 billion funding gap, and then we said that countries should invest between 4 and 6, but in terms of gross domestic product, 6% is should be the target of it. And in far as official development assistance, it should really stand at 0.7%. So what are the targets briefly? The first target is by 2030 to ensure that all boys and girls complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education. And what is very important, to look not just at them entering the education cycle, but what are the outcomes. This is a total shift into the understanding about how we measure and how we monitor education. On the other side, it is the indicators that we have also elaborated in the meantime, because every target has to have an indicator. The second is that early childhood development is a new concept. For the first time also, we inscribed it as a target that early childhood care and education is vital for human development, for the learning, and further on. Then the third is about technical and vocational training and tertiary education, universities, and if you notice, is equal access for women and men, because we know there is a gap. When we speak about technical vocational training in many countries, boys go, but women and girls do not enter this cycle. Then we have also the skills, employment, jobs, entrepreneurship, very much linked also to the preceding target, which was also important. Then we have number 5, it is the gender disparities in education, I would say wider, and if I may say, also looking at people with disabilities, the vulnerable, the indigenous population, I would say children in vulnerable situation. This is also very important that we look at those people that do not have this access. Then it is about literacy, because still we know that in the world there are around 800 million people, illiterate people, and with the poor quality of education in some countries, some children, albeit they have been through the primary education, they become functionally literate. So we still have to continue this fight against illiteracy. And here for the first time, we also mentioned numeracy, because nowadays, in order to be literate, in order to benefit from education and learning, of course, you have to know numeracy. And goal number 7, which is very important, and then I will elaborate more on that, the target, it is about knowledge, skills, need to promote sustainable development, including through education for sustainable development, another big area of new, I would say, focus of education, sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, cultural diversity, and also culture's contribution to sustainable development. I think this is exactly what also the Prime Minister was speaking this morning when he was speaking about how to prepare young people for the globalization and disruptive environments and societies, which needs a different type of skills also nowadays. And then there were a couple of additions which were slightly adding, I would say, to the others about the upgrade education facilities, making them more sensitive. And this is about developing countries, how to develop scholarships, how to support also the developing countries into this very complex process, because we know that developed and middle-income countries, although middle-income countries have huge, I would say, disparities and inequalities in terms of education, so we have to support the least developed countries. And the last, of course, once again, we put a very strong emphasis on teachers, because we think that teachers are key to this reform process and to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal number 4. Now, goal number 4 is regularly monitored, it's regularly looked after. We have meetings in the United Nations constantly. I just wanted briefly to show that as other goals, this goal number 4 is particularly a focus on this. In fact, one of the first meetings of the Sustainable Development Forum was dedicated to education. So, what are these global challenges that require really from us also a different approach in terms of education? Of course, it is about the rapid development of technologies. We know this. We spoke this morning about it. It is the different types of economies that we are living through. It is the greater migration among countries and within countries. We know that this is very much linked to another goal, goal number 11, about urban cities, urban development, sustainability. It is the growing inequalities. Many of the questions this morning were also tackling the issues about inequalities and what actually education can bring to that. It is about overall sustainable development, this new concept that is promoted by Agenda 2030, and what is actually sustainable development. Sustainable development is about putting the dots together between the economic, the social, and the environmental impact and developments in this world, and that nothing can be solved if you look only on the economic or only on the social, environmental. So putting this together to work together will bring sustainability, and also it's the demographics. The Prime Minister today spoke also about globally about demographics, but particularly the youth demographics, because we know that there are countries where 60% of the citizens, or even more, reaching out to 70%, are people below the age of 30. So we think that global citizenship education is a response to these global challenges into an interconnected and globalized world. So we asked our questions: what education for the 21st century? What the purpose of education in these societies, which we call with the disruptive economies? What education in era of interconnect? What education in the 4th industrial revolution? If you go back, there was a famous Brazilian educator, Paulo Freire, who said that education is the practice of freedom, where men and women deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate into the transformation of their world. I think these words that were said some decades ago are very relevant nowadays, when we really have to teach young people new skills, not just technical skills, but new skills to deal with this globalized world. New values, knowledge about peace, sustainable development, human rights, democracy, how to transform this into daily behaviors of tolerance and respect. And in this, briefly, there were 2 UNESCO major reports. This is the first report in '72, the 4 report, which was introducing the ideas of lifelong learning, the learning societies, very early on, that later were integrated. And it said that lifelong education is the master concept for education policies. And the second, which was more recent, it is the Delors report, which is still very relevant, although we see new ideas coming, which was called Learning, the Treasure Within, and it was based on 4 pillars. These 4 pillars are learning to be, learning to know, learning to do, and learning to live together. So this is where also this report is still very meaningful, saying that the principal means to foster a deeper and more harmonious form of human development, and thereby to reduce poverty, exclusion, oppression, and war. So when Mr. Ban Ki-moon proposed in 2013, 2012, and 2013, supported by UNESCO, Education First initiative, it was exactly where the Global Education Initiative came into the public space. We picked it up from there, and then we started to elaborate more as to what are the elements of this global citizenship education. It was linked to the two main objectives of the global community, United Nations, about peace, about sustainable development, the two sides, and also to say that nowadays, in a world that is so much interconnected, and sometimes they go beyond the national borders, we have to have some kind of a responsibility towards each other into this globalized world. And that is why we said that education is not just a technical way of transferring knowledge. Nowadays, knowledge is everywhere. It is not about memorizing. It's a different way of learning. But it is about values. It is about the values of living together, of human rights, of human dignity, and that we have to go beyond numeracy and literacy in order to acquire these different learning environments. And I think on the basis of this kind of a vision for education for global citizenship, we were trying really to shift the paradigm, I would say, of education nowadays. We really need to look globally as to what is happening in the world and how we make this world more tolerant, more respectful, how we look also at the sustainability. I think this is the key word in this particular case, and how we acquire this critical thinking about events and everything that is happening in the world, so that citizens really become responsible citizens. They take informed decisions, be it about politics, about climate, about their own lives, about the economy, about the social issues. So on different levels, we start to work more kind of elaborate, go deeper. I would like here that to say that the link between the global citizenship education and education for sustainable development is very important. It is the first stage. There was a decade until 2014 that was leading towards a higher, I would say, level of understanding nowadays of the challenges. Education for sustainable development was integrated into the global citizenship education. We had a big program of ESD in action. I'm afraid we don't have time to look more into details into this program. I just wanted to flag it out. But I would like just to say that nowadays I believe that global citizenship education is a challenge, but it is also a response to the challenges that exist nowadays in the world. Still, there is a lot of thinking into this. I would like particularly to emphasize the role of APSIU, because I think APSIU here, the Asia-Pacific Center for Education for International Understanding, and globally Korea is taking the lead into the thinking about global citizenship education, how it is integrated into curricular, what kind of teacher training, what kind of a local response, because one size does not fit all, what kind of local response it has to be there. And I believe that the interest, I would say, that has been stirred by the work of the APSIU in different parts of the world, because it's a global center under the auspices of UNESCO, is bringing today, is really something that has to be commended. So I would like to say once again that it is an opportunity, it is an answer also to a world under pressure, and I tend to think that global citizenship education is the bedrock of sustainability. So thank you for your attention.